It's 8:21. This is BBC Radio London. I'm Jumoke Fashola. Now, this week, a UK-wide inquiry held into what has been called the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS was announced, or will be held, was announced. The contaminated blood scandal left at least 2,400 people dead and thousands living with HIV and or hepatitis C after infected blood products were used in blood transfusions, and in particular as part of treatments for those suffering from the bleeding disorder Haemophilia. The imported plasma used in the 1970s and 80s to make factor VIII to help treat haemophiliacs came from donors like prison inmates in the US who sold their blood. To tell us more about what they hope from the inquiry and what it will achieve and the work they do to support those who were affected, I'm joined by Courtney, who is the Policy and Public Affairs Manager at the Haemophilia Society, alongside Adrian Goodyear, who contracted HIV, hepatitis B and C through contaminated blood products as part of the treatment he received for haemophilia. Jeff, let's start with you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Reading this, it sounds like a scandal in its making before anyone did an inquiry. All the things I've said there are true, aren't they? That's what happened.
Yes, this scandal started many years ago. Really kind of goes back actually earlier into the early 70s, right, when the government was trying to become self-sufficient in the production of blood products. And to maybe explain that a little bit, blood products are what are given to people with haemophilia and other bleeding disorders. They tend to be missing a clotting factor, something that allows their blood to clot properly. And that was treated at the time, and in many cases still is treated, by replacing that factor with injections of that protein.
Right.
In the 70s, a new miracle drug effectively appeared, where rather than having to give just blood transfusions or simply plasma, they could concentrate products down to just that required protein. And then those products, such as, for example, factor VIII, became available in the mid-70s. Demand, however, was quite high, and the UK fell behind in its production and therefore ended up importing those products from the US. The problem is that once you were creating these pooled blood products where up to 50,000 people's blood was combined together and then concentrated down, the chance of even a single donor contaminating an entire batch was extremely high. You referred to the fact that in the US, paid donors were used, particularly in places like prisons or in parts of the city that had a higher chance of people having bloodborne viruses, and that then increased the risk, exponentially from there.
So essentially, we would not know, even with the best will in the world, who donated what.
I think people did know. I mean, we've seen evidence that people were aware that they were taking blood from people with, for example, hepatitis, but yet continued to take donations from them. Also, with a system of paid donors, you have a strong incentive for people to cover up their infections in order to continue to be allowed to donate blood.
Well, let's have a chat with Adrian. Adrian, good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure, Adrian. Now, my goodness me, you've been through the wars, and none of it your own fault, it seems.
Absolutely not. No, I was first infected in 1977 with hepatitis B from British factor VIII plasma concentrates. And then again, I was infected in 1981 with Hep B again, hepatitis C. And then when I was 12 years old, unfortunately, HIV. So yes, it's been an extremely tragic and difficult life, really, to be honest, for many of us around the UK.
So what do you hope from this inquiry? Because your entire life has been affected by this.
Oh, what? Well, we're feeling quite conflicted, and to be truthful, since the announcement was made, it was a surprise. What we're hoping for is the truth. It's out in the inquiry form, as no inquiry has ever been undertaken to compel witnesses, and which in turn means that no liabilities have been proven, which means no compensation has been paid. And so many have been left scraping by and state benefits, and that's just not right nor fair. So we're just hoping that we can have a conversation with the Department of Health, the officials who knew what when, and put it into some kind of timeline in a legal setting.
How were you told that you had contracted these various diseases?
At first, we weren't. It wasn't even discussed with my family. I must add, I've also lost both my brothers, Jason and Gary, from AIDS and hepatitis C, respectively. So I'm the last one alive now. Yes, I know. And that's been extremely difficult. So we weren't really told. My dad was just ushered out the ward when I was 7 on my first injection of factor VIII concentrate, and I went yellow within 2 days and blistered. And my dad asked, "What are you doing to my son?" And he was ushered out the room, and after that, visits from my family were restricted. It was awful, to be honest. And then I got sick again, just like many other people did around the UK at that time. And regarding HIV, we were told, it's a specialist college in Alton, Hampshire, where 72 people have now died from their infections, many in the early 90s from hepatitis C and B and HIV. We were told in groups of 5, gently and calmly, but we were just 12 and young children.
And you wouldn't have understood the implications.
Of course not. HIV, of course, was then in the media, so we knew what that meant. That meant you were going to die.
Gosh.
Within 2 to 3 years as children, and many did. So many did. Bless them all.
So, and throughout this journey that you've taken through your life, and all of this never having been any of your own fault or doing, have you received any sort of compensation?
We did actually receive an ex gratia payment of £23,500, but we had to sign a waiver to say that we wouldn't take the government to court in any way, shape or form. We also, in my case, I signed the waiver after we lost 4 people in one winter period, and we were told that we wouldn't get anything. If we did not sign that waiver, we would get nothing. So we were already in those days post-traumatically stressed, and we signed. I waited as long as I could before I signed in my case. But tagged on to the end of this was also hepatitis C. They knew that we were infected with hepatitis C at the Department of Health and within our haemophilia centres. And then we had to sign this without that knowledge. So 3 months later, we found out we had hepatitis C. And that was underhanded.
Indeed. I mean, anyone listening to this would be appalled. And are you hoping that this waiver will be rescinded?
I'm not sure about the legalities of that. Maybe Jeff can assist further with that, of course. But that needs to be seriously looked at because it was underhand. I mean, I don't know how much information our solicitors at the time had and what they were offering up to us. But I know my friend and I at the time would not have signed that waiver with that knowledge.
How old were you at that point?
At that point, that was 1991, so I would have been 20.
20. Thank you, Adrian. Jeff, just comment briefly on what Adrian has just said. Do you think that the waiver could be rescinded? But what kind of outcome are you hoping from this inquiry?
So firstly, on the waiver itself, the view of the Haemophilia Society is that waiver is unlawful and that people were signed it without being given the full situation of what was taking place. We hope and expect that it is either unenforceable or the government would voluntarily withdraw it. Mm-hmm. What we're expected to happen is that if an inquiry goes ahead with the full powers that it needs, and that still hasn't been fully decided yet, then from evidence that we've seen and more evidence that's likely to become available, we think the government was negligent. We think that will be shown. There may well be criminal prosecutions, but also, as Adrian said, there will likely be liability shown, and that would then lead to compensation. If that doesn't occur, the situation, as Adrian mentions now, is that the government has paid these small ex gratia payments. They provide ongoing support to some people. However, the government has been consulting on that, so separately consulting on those support schemes, and people by the end of this year are likely to be left with less support than they were getting previously. So this inquiry is very important, both to establish the truth, but also to make the government properly take responsibility for what happened.
We'll have to leave it there, but we'll certainly be following up on that story. Jeff Courtney, who's the Policy and Public Affairs Manager at the Haemophilia Society, and also my thanks to Adrian Goodyear, who, as you heard, contracted HIV, hepatitis B and C through contaminated blood products as part of the treatment he received for haemophilia.